The Guam Legislature is back from recess. I will recognize Speaker Tina Munoz Barnes.
Situ Smasi, Madam Speaker, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to work closely with legal and get some parameters on the action before us as it relates to the amendment. So at this time, I'm going to respectfully ask that I withdraw the amendment, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. On the motion to withdraw, are there any objections? Motion carries.
Madam Speaker, if I may, again, thank you, everybody, for this. I hope that in the efforts of working with my colleagues and working with the multiple amendments, again, like I said earlier, I'm hoping that my colleagues can consider this signage bill, and I ask that it be moved to the third reading voting file.
On the motion to move Bill 86-35 to the third reading file, hearing no objections, motion passes. We will take a short recess.
Imina 35 na legislature in Guam is back from recess. At this time, colleagues, good afternoon. We are now on bill number 127-35 COR. Senator Marsh Taitanu, you are recognized.
Saina Ma'asi, Madam Speaker. I move to place Bill 127-35 COR as introduced on the third reading file, and I would like to discuss it.
Senator Marsh, as noted for procedure, read the title from the committee, the sponsorship, and the full title of the bill, please.
Again, Bill number 127-35 COR, an act to add a new section 1038 to Chapter 10, Title 1, Guam Code Annotated, relative to officially establish an annual Peace Officers Memorial Day for Guam, introduced by myself and Senator Jose Pt.2.
So please proceed.
Sa namaasi, Madam Speaker. This bill formalizes what John F. Kennedy put into place in the 1960s. However, in all of those decades since, it's been an informal tradition. Peace officers cover many categories, actually. We have police officers that might be the first that comes to mind for all of us, including airport police officers, but it also includes customs and quarantine officers, those within the Department of of Corrections, park patrol officers, fire personnel, criminal investigators of the U.S. government, the Attorney General and investigators in that office, the Division of Aquatic and Wildlife Resources Conservation officers and inspectors, compliance officers and criminal investigators at the Department of Revenue and Taxation, judiciary marshals, Department of Youth Affairs, those who work with juvenile detention and rehabilitation, and many others. So by passing this bill, we will be formally recognizing a wide section of our community, men and women, who put themselves in the line of danger in ways that many of us don't, too many of which have made the ultimate sacrifice and have either been injured or lost their lives. They deserve for us not to leave the recognition of their sacrifices that are done on the good of, for the good of the community, to not leave it just to happenstance, to the status of that we will hopefully remember to have a proclamation for it, but to codify it and ensure that it absolutely is given that formal recognition and it absolutely will occur each year. Chief Ignacio and other peace officers have expressed that they are very supportive of this bill, and they were very grateful and expressed their thanks for my creating a bill that codifies the recognition and observance of the Peace Officers Memorial Day, providing them the dignity and consideration that they deserve. This bill states that the legislature recognizes the importance of saying that I Magahaga Put Magalahi shall proclaim May 15th to be Peace Officers Memorial Day each year, and shall appoint a committee to plan and make appropriate arrangements for the observation of this day. Just to clarify, this is not making it a paid holiday or a holiday. It is a day of recognition and observation. There is a lot of precedence for bills of this nature to go forward and have the governor proclaim, to say that the governor shall proclaim such days. The Guam Island Fair, Family Violence Prevention Month, Farmer Appreciation Days, and many others. Surely our women and men who protect our lives and our children's lives and all of our well-being deserve no less than the days of recognition and commemoration that I just mentioned. I'd like to take a moment to mention the names of those in our community who have already made the ultimate sacrifice on behalf of us all, if I may, just to give them that recognition. So those who have served as peace officers and have given their lives, there's Conservation Officer Francisco M. Isazaki, Patrolman Francisco D. Taidagui, Patrolman Juan M. Santos, Drug Enforcement Administration Special Agent Larry D. Wallace, Police Officer 1 Francisco A. Regis, Police Officer 3 Thomas M. Sablan, Civilian Volunteer Police Reserve Helen K. Lizama, Civilian Volunteer Police Reserve Rudy C. Iglesias, Police Officer 1 Raymond S. Sanchez, Police Officer 1 Manuel A. Aquino, Police Lieutenant Francisco C. Tovis, Corrections Officer 1 Douglas W. Mashburn, Police Officer 1 Eddie A. Santos, United States Air Force Airman Lori Lucas, United States Air Force Sergeant Stacy E. Leve, Police Sergeant 1 Frankie E. Smith, and Police Sergeant 1 Siegfried D. Mortera. So I've received a lot of support from my colleagues, and I hope that they will continue to support this bill as we move forward. Saina Maasi.
Si Diyos Masi, Senator March Tachino. Anyone else on the main motion? If not, to move. Senator Regine Biscoli.
Sujos Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this bill, and especially as the author of this bill had mentioned, peace officers extends beyond just our police department. You know, we also have corrections officers, members of DYA who assist us with youth that might be incarcerated, conservation officers, those in the fire department. And I just want to ensure that those names of those entities, anybody who might be, who might have given their lives in service and in the line of service, in the line of duty, also be included in the intent section. I believe that these names are names of officers in the Guam Police Department, but I just want to ensure that we maybe take a little bit of time to reach out to those agencies and then maybe give legal the opportunity to include those names also in the intent section to make sure that all of these names are included and that we're memorializing all of the lives that were lost. Sujos Masi.
Senator Lee, would you like to proffer that as an amendment so that legal counsel can at least look in and those names that are inadvertently not put in, that there could be
Absolutely.
something?
And I'll certainly use the resources of my office to reach out to some of these to these entities, and hopefully the bill's author could also assist in just trying to get a full complement of names and a list of names to legal counsel. But I just at this time, Madam Speaker, make a motion to allow legal counsel to add additional names onto the intent section of those who've given their lives in the line of duty.
On that motion, any objections? Hearing none. Motion carries. Anyone else on the main motion? Anyone else? If not, Senator March Tachino, would you like to close or put it down to the third reading file? Voting file.
I would just like to thank my colleagues for their support. Certainly, we want to make sure that every name is on there. We had checked earlier, but some time has passed since we first wrote this bill, so we will continue to be checking. And I would like to make a motion to place this bill in the voting file.
On that motion, without any objection, motion carries. Thank you, Senator Tachino. Senator Tello Taigui, you are recognized on Bill number 131-35, CLR. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move to place Bill 135-35 Core as amended by the Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriation, and Housing, which is an act to amend 26603 D1 of Article 6, Chapter 26, Title 11, Guam Code Annotated, related to Healthy Futures Fund proceeds authorized for the Guam Memorial Hospital line of credit. And I would like to speak on this, Madam Speaker.
On the motion, Senator Taigui, please proceed.
Madam Speaker and my colleagues, this is a very easy bill. It's just a correction. So for the background on this bill, I came across this issue in my research of various special funds during the FY 2020 budget hearings. And as stated during the public hearing, the measure proposes a small technical correction to the section reference in section 26603 D1 of Article 6, Chapter 26, Division 2, Title 11, Guam Code Annotated, which appropriates $1 million annually from the Healthy Futures Fund to the Guam Memorial Hospital to pay for the line of credit if sought. Madam Speaker, the correct section which should be referenced is 10 GCA Section 8019S and not 10 GCA Section 8014T. And although this is a minor correction to the statute, such an edit can only be done through legislation. And according to an email I received from the compiler of law on May 6, 2019, the office stated, the Healthy Futures Fund 11 GCA 26603D1 does reference 10 GCA 8014T in the Public Law 30-166. And it's beyond our scope of authority to make the change to cite 10 GCA 8019S, and it would need legislative action to be corrected. And it's as simple as that, Madam Speaker. The compiler of law is unable to make the correction, so we have to do it by legislation. That's all.
Sizus Masi, Senator Tadegui. Anyone else on the main motion? Senator Teresa Lai, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yeah, I rise in support of the bill. It does make a correction that is necessary, but I just want to make sure that the public doesn't get the wrong idea that the authority for the Guam Memorial Hospital to arrange for a line of credit has been in the statute for many years, and so it allows the governor to utilize a revolving fund or a line of credit for the Guam Memorial Hospital. This bill is not doing that today. It's just fixing a citation in that law. And as far as I know, there has been no move for that at this point. So I just wanted to make that clear in case the media gets it wrong. Situs Masi.
Thank you, Senator Terlai. Anyone else on the main motion? Senator Regine Biscoli, you are recognized.
So just Masi, Madam Speaker, if the author of the bill could just clarify, so the subsection that we're referencing that's being requested to be taken out and replaced, so the one that we are removing is 80104T. And in pulling up Guam code, I'm having trouble finding 80104T, but I am able to find 80109S. So is that the reason why I just want to be very clear about what it is that's in the code right now and what it is that we're replacing it with. So if I could just have the language of both. Thank you.
Sizus Masi, Senator Lee. Senator Tadegui, would you like to yield?
Yes, Madam Speaker, thank you. How it's referencing in the Guam Code annotated, it doesn't reference 10 GCA 80104T. So what we're doing is we're just changing. We're changing from 10 GCA Section 8014T to Section 80109S. So from Tango to Sahara. That's all we're changing there. I can actually point it out in the law itself, Madam Speaker, to show the difference. Wait, go ahead. Yeah.
Senator Lee.
Point of information, Madam Speaker.
Okay.
She's correct. There is no 80104T. We can't find it. There is none. It was the wrong reference when they wrote 801.4T in another law. That was wrong. So we're correcting it to read 80109S. That one you can find, but she's correct. You cannot find 80104T.
I will take that as clarification. Senator Lee, will that suffice? Sizus Masi. Thank you. Anyone else on the main motion? Anyone else? Senator Tadegui, would you like to close?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I appreciate the explanation from the good oversight chair. It sounds a little confusing. Sorry for that. But I'd like to move this to the third reading file, Madam Speaker.
Voting file.
Bill 131-35 court. To the third
move
reading
to the voting file without any objections. Motion carries. Ladies and gentlemen, to my colleagues, we are on bill number 150-35 COR. Senator Kelly March Titano, I will recognize you at this time.
Sinemaasi, Madam Speaker. I move to place Bill number 150-35, COR, introduced by myself, Senators Sabina Flores Perez, Speaker Tina Muñoz Barnes, Senators C.E. Rigel, Teresa M. Terlahi, and Jose Pito Terlahi. It is an act to amend Section 2104 of Chapter 2, Title 5, Guam Code Annotated, relative to the expanding the scope of the Island Beautification Task Force.
You want to move it to the third reading and to speak?
Yes, to place it in the third reading file, and then would like to discuss it.
Please proceed, Senator March Titano.
Sinemaasi, Madam Speaker. The Island Beautification Task Force is an existing entity, and certainly it does important things for us. They have duties such as clearing overgrown weeds, planting plants and flowers. This bill adds in that they should be especially focusing on native flora. They also do work such as restoring of graffiti-inflicted structures, especially along scenic highways and so forth. One of the positives of this bill is that it is an existing entity which already gathers a variety of agencies and others to come together and work towards the good of the community. So we are not adding to the number of task forces, commissions, or boards, which are already considered a fairly high number. This bill is an opportunity to leverage that which already exists. In reading from the bill, we have entities such as the Guam Visitors Bureau, the Department of Public Works, the Department of Parks and Recreation, the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Corrections. The Director of the Guam Environmental Protection Agency is something that this bill adds in. And those from EPA, after one of the public testimonies, actually came to me and thanked me for including them, because they are often doing related work, or they are included but it's informally, and so they felt it was very appropriate for them to be involved in the type of work of the Island Beautification Task Force. And then a member from the Mayor's Council of Guam. They are very close to all of our community members, maybe the most accessible, and work at that grassroots level, and so they are very closely attuned to the needs and the concerns and the ways of the community and the landscapes within each of those villages. And other members as the chairperson deems necessary. So that is the task force that's already in place. We've added in a couple of relevant members that I've noted. So by having such a group of agencies and entities be a permanent umbrella, if you will, to tackle some of the issues that we've been plagued with as a community for a long time. We've given them some additional responsibilities, such as implementing other beautification projects, preventing littering, preventing the illegal disposal of waste at unauthorized sites, and preventing the destruction of public facilities, including parks and benches, establishing education, training, or programs of the same, and addressing other pertinent issues. Part of the reason that we had thought about adding this to their set of work is that with the agencies that tackle these issues from time to time, they have other main focus for their work, and sometimes they do get grants, and sometimes there are themes that the national agencies or national entities might have for them where they can focus specifically on littering here or there, on illegal dumping here or there, but there's no single entity that works on this in a concerted, long-term way. This fits in with what I believe our body stands for, looking for those long-term solutions where somebody, some entity will be tackling a decades-old set of issues in a long-term fashion. This task force is here from administration to administration. It's here from year to year, no matter who's in the legislature or who's in the administration. We need someone to tackle these behavioral and other issues at that higher level that's going to set an agenda for these agencies, that's going to gather these agencies and entities together to have them think together, be a think tank, if you will, together. This is going to need a variety of approaches, and so they can put forward approaches such as having agencies work together, tell the task force what their issues are or are not, and they can have them coordinate with one another. One of them they could consider is to have the mayor's offices as an amnesty area where certain types of trash can be given. Right now we're dealing with a lot of illegal dumping, and I think that if they get together and work on this together, they could figure out if it actually is saving taxpayers in that larger picture money and resources by working together and figuring out a way that we might have amnesty areas and a way that we might use our fines for certain things like littering and illegal dumping to actually fund the removal from these amnesty areas to the proper trash collection areas. We all are familiar with different mascots. They could come up with a mascot to get both the young and the rest of us on board. We all, if I mention Woodsy the Owl, well, maybe I'm aging myself. If we mention Woodsy the Owl, maybe a lot of us could say, you know, give a hoot, don't pollute. Or if we referred to Smokey the Bear, which is now apparently Smokey Bear, we know that he is tackling the issue of forest fires, right? And so we have quite a few native flora or fauna that could serve as mascots, that could be ways to reach out to the community, reach out to our youth, reach out to the rest of us. So a think tank of relevant agencies and entities that comes together in a long-term fashion would be an important direction for us to be taking. We will need other steps in tackling this large issue, but I think that they could make a real difference in tackling the behavioral components, but also getting the agencies to coordinate together and think in a larger fashion rather than just in a single agency fashion about how they might address something. So with that, I hope to gather the support. I've talked to quite a few of the senators here, but for those that I haven't addressed specifically, I hope that we can come together and provide support for this so that we have an entity like this that will be working towards the good for all of us in that long-term fashion. Sana maasi.
Situs Masi, Senator Taitino. Anyone wishing to speak on the main motion? Anyone wishing to speak? If not, Senator Sabina, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this bill. I think that, you know, we can all agree that we have a chronic problem in illegal dumping, and I think it's prudent to include Guam EPA in this beautification task force to address this problem in a more consistent fashion. So I thank the sponsor of this bill in ensuring, or through this bill, ensuring that there is a concerted and comprehensive effort. In August of this year, I convened a roundtable regarding illegal dumping, and there were many great ideas that came up during that roundtable. One of them was that we have to address changing the culture of this island, to take pride in our island and instill best practices. And I think this beautification task force is one such measure that can help to address that by changing the culture of this island. And I just for one item of thought is that, you know, the initial task of the beautification task force was planting flowers, and this has actually been shown to diminish illegal dumping. So just by pursuing the tasks that they already have can actually address illegal dumping, in addition to other measures that can be developed in this task force. So I thank the good author for this, and I rise in support of this.
Si Jus Masi, Senator Paris. Anyone else on the main motion? Senator Pt.2, consigue mo na por favor.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. You know, several months ago, the Mayor's Council was given the privilege to go out and do the citations for violators, but I don't think that's going to work. The only thing that's going to work, in as far as making sure that we catch those people that are trashing out on the road, is to get somebody to be posted on those areas, and just kind of put surveillance. And the penalty should be, if any vehicle is caught discarding trash out there, that particular vehicle should be confiscated and the fine should be raised. But and I rise in support of this particular bill, but the approach that we need to do in this area, in as far as catching those people that are really trashing the side of our roads, secondary roads and all that, we need to post people out there. We can use, and I was thinking about just doing a alternative sentencing to support this, and get those people to really be posted out there, especially on areas that is being trashed out there. And in as far as giving the mayors the privilege to issue citation, that's not going to work, because they trash those areas during the evening hours or late evening hours, and what we need to do is post people out there where the trash are being discarded by our residents. And unless we have somebody to be posted in those areas, we need to do something like that. Issuing citation is not going to work, because they're not going to catch it unless we post people out there on the secondary routes and all those to really just maintain that security and that surveillance, and increase the penalty for whoever is responsible, confiscate those vehicles, and make the fine really high, and confiscate those vehicles. And unless they pay the $500 fine, for example, we're gonna find some success in that approach. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Buen provecho, Senator Terlahi. Senator Regine Biscoli, you're recognized.
So just Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I thank the author of this measure, and I rise in support of it, certainly. But I think some of the comments that were made by the retiring speaker are pretty spot on. I think that it's really important for us to see this measure as a good expansion of IBTF, but we also have to really think about enforcement. Enforcement is key, because if we have these penalties in place but they're not being enforced, then we've all seen what can happen and what is happening all across our island. We hear from many of the mayors, many constituents call our offices. They're calling in talk radio in the morning, complaining about how they have to be the ones to pick up the trash around their kids' bus stops as they're waiting for the school bus in the morning. And, we see it just driving down the road, and it's so unsightly to see all this illegal dumping, and then what more further deeper into the jungle that we go. So I really look forward to expanding to IBTF, but also to hearing from them about additional recommendations that this body can consider. And so we look forward to that process happening through IBTF. And I think, Madam Speaker, really what this comes down to is it's an issue of pride. When you take pride in your island and you take pride in your community, there's just no way that you would be caught dead throwing a cigarette butt out the window or a plastic wrapper, let alone huge bags of household trash, dumping that in a jungle somewhere. When you take pride in your island and in yourself, there's just no way that you would let that happen. And I think it's really vital that all of these members of the IBTF, Guam Visitors Bureau, Department of Parks and Rec, Public Works, Agriculture, DEPCOR, and now the Guam Environmental Protection Agency and our mayors, those are also, really key leadership organizations within our government. And then there's also an addition for other members as the chairperson may deem necessary. And I won't go as far as to adding an amendment to require that this group be included, but I want to, just put it on the record that I personally would support the Lieutenant Governor, who is the chairperson of IBTF. I would support him, especially as our current Lieutenant Governor, as a former Speaker of the Guam Youth Congress, really engaging our youth. And in organizations like the Guam Youth Congress, like IBOGs, like student councils in all of our schools, really trying to engage our youth and instilling that pride in our youth. And hopefully that can create a ripple effect into our families and our communities and our entire island. And we can really turn the tide, stem the tide of this kind of really trashy, horrific, we don't like to see this kind of thing all across our island, Madam Speaker. So again, I thank the author, and I really encourage the members of the Island-Wide Beautification Task Force to continue to work with the legislature to give us key recommendations of how we can, what their recommendations are for policies that we could stem this tide. Thank you.
Sitio Smasi, Senator Regine Biscoli. Anyone else? Senator Terlai, you already had the floor. Do you have an inquiry, sir? Do you have a?
I don't have a question, just a point of concern, Madam Speaker.
State
And I
your
want to
point of
thank.
inquiry.
I just want to thank our good senator for the bill that she's introducing regarding lowering the fees of the trash collection. However, I support reducing the trash collection for those people that are not earning as much as they want to earn. The problem with me on that, Madam Speaker, is that those people that are trashing out there are people that are not registered with the Department of Public Works to pay their trash. The most, and I am certain about this, most people that are doing that are people that are not registered with Department of Public Works.
Thank you, Senator.
It's good if we reduce the trash collection. I support that, but let me just say that those that are really trashing out there are people that are not registered with Public Works.
Thank you, Senator Terlahi, for that inquiry and concern. Anyone else on the main motion? If not, Senator Taitsuna, would you like to close?
Saina Maasi, Madam Speaker. And I thank those who rose in support and those who have given me other mentions of support for this bill. And certainly the discussion that was brought forward is very telling of the type of work that can be tackled or concerns that we can bring to a task force such as this. whether it is feasible to lower fees or another approach should be made. The comptroller himself had referred to a program in California where people could actually volunteer and pay a little extra to provide additional services or to help out a family in need with their trash collection. So a task force such as this could look at models like that and figure out approaches that might make sense for us. And I'm excited about that possibility. Other speakers mentioned the importance of enforcement, and certainly this think tank needs to take a hard look at enforcement. And I'm so glad that the former speaker mentioned it. I too am hoping that they will come to us with some policy recommendations, that these groups together will come together and think about those root causes. It was mentioned at one of the roundtables that sometimes there are dumpsters and people will illegally dump all around it anyway. So there are obviously some behavioral root causes that are happening that we need to tackle at that behavioral place. So, as I mentioned, all of the things that have been brought up, I appreciate those. They tell us exactly the types of things that a task force like this can be tackling. And I hope everyone will continue to support the bill, because a cleaner, healthier, happier environment certainly means a healthier community. And I really do like the Youth Congress member participation, potentially. I've seen Youth Congress members participate in other boards and commissions, and I think it does very many important things. And so I hope that the Lieutenant Governor will also seriously consider a permanent or somehow getting the Youth Congress involved, either by inviting a member to officially represent the Youth Congress or to include them in other ways. So with that, I move to place the bill into the voting file.
Third reading voting file. Are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Senator Amanda L. Shelton on bill number 157-35 COR. Please proceed.
Assiduous Masi, Madam Speaker, I move to place bill number 157-35 COR as amended by the Committee on Health, Tourism, Historic Preservation, Land and Justice, introduced by myself, Tina Rose Munoz-Barnes, Talina Cruz Nelson, Joe S. San Augustine, James C. Moylan, and Luis Borja Munoz, an act to add a new section 89.16 and amend section 89.01 G1 to chapter 89 of Title IX, Guam Code Annotated, relative to requiring convicted sexual offenders whose cases are under appeal to retain their absolute duty to register at the Judiciary of Guam Probation Division as a sex offender into the third reading file for discussion.
Legislative Secretary Shelton, you can proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. We introduced Bill 157-35 to close a loophole in the sex offender registry law. The Guam Sex Offender Registry was established by Public Law 25-75 in 1999 with the intent to protect members of our island community from sexual offenders by monitoring those offenders and making their information accessible to the public. This information includes the name, date of birth, list of offenses, home address, work address, physical description, headshot, and known vehicles of the offender. This database is vital to protect existing victims, to deter recidivism among offenders, and to prevent future sexual offenses. A study published in the Journal of Law and Economics finds sex offender registration reduces the number of sex offenses by about 13%. That represents dozens of possible sexual assaults that could be prevented on Guam every year through the use of the Sexual Offender Registry. We started working on this bill when survivors of sexual assault came to our office and specifically asked for this legislation. They said it was their priority and the first thing they would change to make Guam safer from sexual predators. This was after a well-known instance of a convicted sex offender under appeal who was not required to enter into the Guam Sex Offender Registry and was allowed to travel and work off-island in the same environment where he had been convicted of perpetrating his crimes. Since that time, the Pacific Daily News has reported that just last month, a level 1 sex offender was allowed to travel to the Philippines after he had been convicted of rape. He was not on the sex offender registry because his case was under appeal. My colleagues, Madam Speaker, we know the saying, knowledge is power. We know from academic studies that registration reduces rapes. We must empower our women, our children, our families with the knowledge of sex offenders in our community. I want to thank the bravery of the women who came forward to help us craft this legislation. I know it was not easy for them. When victims come to you to tell you their experience, it must be a priority for us to address and to fix the system. I also want to thank the Public Defender's Office and the Office of the Attorney General, who both contributed to amend the language to better achieve the intent of this legislation, as well as the committee who helped us to amend the original bill. By setting the requirement to register at the point in which a sentence is pronounced, as recommended by the Attorney General, those whose convictions are under appeal would be required to register and clarifies when the requirement comes into place. By amending the language to disallow a judge to stay the registration requirement, as recommended by the public defender, this further ensures those under appeal would always be required to register. Of course, if the appeal is successful and the conviction vacated, they are removed from the registry. So, Madam Speaker, I'd like to again thank all of the parties who brought this issue to our attention, everyone who helped strengthen this bill, and all of our colleagues who have supported this bill and who will support to keep our community safe from these sexual predators and to bring this to bring a sense of relief to our people who are worried about this. So, Madam Speaker, I thank you for this, and I look forward to the discussion and any input from our colleagues.
Si Juice Mahasi, Legislative Secretary. Shelton, anyone else on the main motion? Senator Teresa Terlaia, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this bill, and I want to commend the author and the co-sponsors of this legislation. It closes a loophole that has been allowed, and it will bring, I think, further justice to the victims who have been witnessing in the newspaper that the perpetrators have been able to travel while they are waiting their appeal, and they are not living out their sentences in that time. So I think this is a very good bill. It's going to allow them to be put, and it's going to increase the safety of the community. I think that's the biggest part of it, is like it's precautionary. It puts them on the list, it gives everyone notice, allows them to use the list to protect themselves, to protect their families, and hopefully to prevent further harm. Si Juice Mahasi, Madam Speaker.
Ben Pabetso, Senator Terlahi. Senator Regine Bis, a moment's recess. Imina 35 na legislature Guam is back from recess. Senator Regine Biscoli, you have the floor.
Suzus Masi, Madam Speaker. Thank you, colleagues, for that brief recess. I do have a question for the author, if she would yield.
Please state the question. Thank you, Senator.
In my reading of the bill and also the committee report, Madam Speaker, there was a testimony that was given by Vero, victims advocates reaching out, and I believe it was a testimony that was submitted by Ms. Karen Carpenter. And while I think it's important that we work to close this loophole, and I certainly stand in support of this bill, and I think that we should always believe victims of sexual assault and abuse, the question from Ms. Carpenter and Vero was, is there a mechanism so that once an appeal, should an appeal be overturned, is there a mechanism that a name could be taken off the registry quickly? Because we also know, what can happen if you are wrongly convicted of something, and we don't want anybody to suffer those negative consequences. So I just want to ask the author of the bill if this part of the testimony was taken into consideration, and if there is a mechanism to quickly remove someone's name should a appeal be overturned.
Si Jusma, si Senator Lee, Legislative Secretary Shelton, would you yield?
Siduous Masi, Madam Speaker, yes, I do yield to the question. It is our understanding that upon the overturning of a conviction, that it would be automatic for the probation division to remove the individual from the sex offender registry. And in the testimony from the executive director of the Public Defender Service Corporation, he also mentioned that Chapter 89 already establishes that the duty to register does not apply if the conviction has been reversed upon appeal.
Si Jusma, si Legislative Secretary, Senator Biscoli, does that suffice?
Yes, it does, Madam Speaker, and I thank my colleague not just for the response to the question, but also for authoring this measure and for guiding us to this point. I certainly rise in support of Bill 157-35, Madam Speaker, because too often in our community we hear these horrific, terrible stories about sexual abuse on our island. And just today, a local business owner was sentenced for molesting a 14-year-old girl known to him. Perhaps adding to the tragedy of these despicable acts, Madam Speaker, an existing relationship between the abuser and the victim is much more common than I think we'd like to admit to ourselves. And this is the plain truth. Many boys and girls, many women and men who survive criminal sexual conduct are related to those who rape them, or those who share their home with those who molest them, or are friends with those who take advantage of an impaired state of mind. And Madam Speaker, I bring this uncomfortable fact to the discussion of this bill to help us build empathy for what victims of sexual assault go through, to maybe ask us to just take a moment to imagine the pain and the hurt that is caused when someone you trust, when someone you love, shatters that trust with a heinous sexual crime. Madam Speaker, to add insult to injury, the loophole described by my good friend from Assen, the author of this measure, means that convicted sexual offenders can exploit our community and other victims further by not registering on the Guam Sex Offender Registry. Criminal sexual conduct is among the top tried crimes on Guam, and part of why this is our terrible reality is because some of these evil people think that they can continue to rape and molest and assault members of our community. Madam Speaker, this bill is a strong stand against those looking to take advantage of not just victims, but our entire justice system. So I would like to take the time to thank the bipartisan coalition of lawmakers, the parole board, the attorney general and his office, and most importantly, like the proffer of this measure said, the victims of sexual abuse who all came together to protect any more people from criminals that we know have a higher likelihood of reoffending in the future. Madam Speaker, this bill deserves to be passed unanimously and signed into law quickly. And I ask my colleagues in this body for their support, and I ask Imagat Haga to help us do just that and to make sure that we continue to protect our community. Sijus Masi.
Buen Pt.2, Senator Bisco Lee. Anyone else on the main motion? Anyone else on the main motion? Legislative Secretary, you're more than welcome to close.
Assiduous Masi, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank all of our colleagues who have spoken in support of this measure. And again, I'd like to thank the survivors of sexual assault who came to us, who asked us for this legislation, who gave their input on how to strengthen our laws to keep our people safe, especially our most vulnerable, our children, our young people. And I just want to share a little bit about what they shared with me, that every time they'd hear about this perpetrator being allowed to travel, being allowed to delay being put on the registry, the sex offender registry, that this would open up their wound again. When they'd think they'd finally feel a little bit better, they were finally getting some closure, the pain would come flooding back to them. And I hope today with this measure, with the support of our colleagues, that we will help to bring closure to them and help prevent this from happening to any other victims, and help us to support our survivors in the best way that we can today. And with that, Madam Speaker, I'd also like to add Senator Therese Terlahi, Senator Regine Bisco-Lee, and Senator Pt.2 Terlahi as co-sponsors of this bill.
On that motion, without any objection, motion carries. On the motion to put it to the voting file, Senator, Legislative Secretary, please.
Assiduous Masi, Madam Speaker, I move to place Bill 157-35 as amended into the voting file.
On that motion, without any objection, motion carries. Colleagues, we are now on Bill number 5-35 LS. Senator Tello Taitagui, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move to place Bill 5-35 LS as amended by the Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriation and Housing, and further amended on the floor during the October 2019 legislative session to the third reading file, and I ask that I may be allowed to briefly speak on the measure.
On that motion, please proceed.
Madam Speaker, without repeating the extensive presentation I provided last month, I urged our colleagues to join me in recognizing the urgency of addressing safety concerns and other challenges at our only public hospital. Madam Speaker, I understand that the bill was introduced recently. I'll just skip over that for this sake. But with the passage of Bill 5, I'm confident that our government will be in a much better position to assemble the right expertise and resources to properly plan for much-needed upgrades to our only public hospital. Madam Speaker, based on the experience so far with a different group working on safe management operations for used oil, I've come to recognize the important work carried out by government task forces in addressing specific issues affecting our families and community, critical decisions and planning efforts done with little to no funding support from the government. But Madam Speaker, what I have, I passed out at your request to ensure that I had this ready to go, is a couple amendments And the first amendment I'd like to make, Madam Speaker, is on page 3, line 22. And Madam Speaker, these amendments came after some conversations I've had or discussions I've had with some of my other colleagues, trying to give a balance to this task force. And, you know, the one thing that I'm trying to keep in mind here on this task force is to be able to work with the administration as well as this body. Two of our, you know, our executive branch and our legislative branch, it's important that we work on something together. So with that, Madam Speaker, I'd like to proffer my first amendment again on page 3, line 22, number 4, where it strikes out a member of the Legislature in Guam appointed by the Speaker of Legislature in Guam, the legislative and incorporate the legislative committee chairperson with jurisdiction on health matters and or his or her designee. Now, Madam Speaker, even though I'm crossing this out, I do have the Speaker of the House to also sit on this task force with his or her designee. That's been in place. That doesn't move. But what I'm doing here is incorporating the chairperson of health matters, which makes sense, you know, for her to sit on this task force, or her designee, his or her designee. So that's what my first amendment does.
Madam, just for clarity's sake, you are saying that based on the amendment as proffered right now, the item number 4A will still exist with this added amendment? I'm going to take a moment's recess.
Okay.
Imina 35 na Legislature in Guam is back from recess. On the amendment, that specifically reads that page 3, beginning on line 22, 4, the deleted portion would be a member of the Legislature in Guam appointed by the Speaker of the Legislature in Guam is deleted to add that the Legislative Committee chairperson with jurisdiction on health matters or his or her designee. But as noted earlier, Section 3 for the Speaker's designee or herself, or his or herself is still there. On that amendment, anyone wishing to speak? Are there any objections? Senator San Agustin, I'll recognize you.
Madam Speaker, we're talking about the amendment to strike out the Speaker to appoint somebody, and that the committee chairperson, jurisdiction of health matters, or his or her designee, is that what we're talking about now?
Yes,
Okay.
that is.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. I object to it. Number one, the chairperson, Committee on Health, has a role already. You don't need to be part of the task force. It's no different if we're talking about money that I'll be appointed. No. Let the task force do what they need to do, and then on the appropriation side, on her and the health, we'll work out what we need to do to help them. And that's my opinion, and I object to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on the amendment? Legislative Secretary, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I also rise in objection to the amendment, seeing that the position would be anyone appointed by the Speaker, then that person could very well be the chairperson of health, and so the Speaker already has the authority to do that, and we don't need this language to make that happen. It's just Masi, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Legislative Secretary. Anyone else on the amendment? If not, there has been a registered objection. Would you like to close, Senator Tadegui?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we're talking about a task force that we put individuals that are there, not crossing our fingers that someone's going to appoint someone that should be sitting there. You know, the concern that was brought up earlier about, you know, oh, the Speaker should have, you know, be able to appoint. Well, the Speaker is already on there. Number 3, the Speaker of Legislature in Guam, his or her designee with who himself or herself shall be a member of Legislature in Guam as a task force member. It's already there. You know, each senator in the majority has an oversight. And in the past, I know that we should have respect for that individual since they have the oversight of that particular agency. Some in public health, some in environment, some in appropriations, some with utilities, public safety. They're all respected. And whenever something comes up with that particular subject, I hope they follow the same rule and have the courtesy and respect to allow that individual oversight chair to sit on a task force that deals with health. Right now, I'm sure everyone who's listening right now is saying, why would they take out the oversight chair of health? Why would somebody do that? Doesn't make sense. She's the oversight chair of health. It doesn't make any sense. Now, if this was on appropriations, I'm sure I'm going to put the appropriations chair on this, but it's not. It's public health. So, I mean, it's about health. So, Madam Chair, I ask my colleagues, think about this. Especially those senators who hold committees. That another task force comes about that they're put on that task force. So with all due respect for each other in this room, I hope that my colleagues will support this amendment because it makes sense. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
There's been an objection registered. All those in favor of the Senator Tadegui amendment, please signify by raising your hand. Motion fails. Senator, I can count.
Madam Speaker, there was a couple that was distracted during the voting.
I will tell you who the count is.
When you asked for the vote, there was a couple people in conversation and wasn't listening. So can we please make a motion to call for the vote?
You need a motion to reconsider the count.
I make a motion to reconsider the count, Madam Speaker, based on some,
on that motion, are there any objections? There's an objection. Again, all those in favor of her, right. On the reconsideration, there's an objection. All those in favor for the reconsideration, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Motion fails. Senator Tidegui, you still have the floor. Yes, Senator Tidegui, please proceed.
Madam Speaker, I have another amendment. And again, it's about making sure that this task force is well balanced and now the opportunity for everybody in this legislature to be part of this task force. And again, it's about taking the legislative, this executive branch, as well as the legislative branch to be a part of this, to bring them together. So on page 4, beginning on line 3, number 7, a member of the general public who shall be appointed by the Speaker of Legislature in Guam, that is scratched out, and incorporated is the minority leader of the Legislature in Guam or his or her designee.
On the amendment, are there anyone wishing to speak? Are there anyone wishing to speak? If not, are there any objections? There's an objection. All those in favor, please signify. There's an objection? Yes. Oh, you can close on the amendment. Yes, Senator Tidegui, please proceed.
Once again, Madam Speaker, this task force that was put together and taken by the advice of some of the individual people sitting in this legislature, as well as former tasks on public health. Again, the importance of adding a variety of individuals to sit down and speak with them. This allows for a minority to be able to sit on this task force. And for the majority, or whoever objected to this, is just, it doesn't make any sense again. Why are you leaving out the minority of this body to sit on a task force is beyond me. You know, the intent of this whole bill was to put a good task force together that's balanced, and right now it looks like it's being sabotaged. And I'm sure a lot of people don't appreciate it, but a lot of people are watching too. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Senator Tidegui closed on the amendment, and that amendment is to take out the member of the general public who shall be appointed by the Speaker of the Legislature in Guam, and then insert the minority leader of the Legislature in Guam or his and her designee. There was an objection. I will call for the votes. All those who support the Senator Tello Tidegui amendment, please signify by raising your hand. Motion fails. Senator Tidegui, do you still have the floor? You still have the floor. Do you have any more amendments? Do you still have?
I have no amendments, further amendments, and I'll just reserve my time at the closing.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Tidegui. On the main motion, are there anyone else wishing to speak on Bill number 5-35 COR? I mean 5-35 LS. On the main motion, Senator Pt.2, I will recognize you, Assistant Majority Leader. You are recognized.
Sedus Masi, Madam Speaker. In looking this over and in having attended some different planning conferences and hearing of other information in other ways, wanting this to be as comprehensive as possible so that we are looking at all options for that best fit for our community. So it may indeed be that the new public hospital facility is the way to go, but we want, if a task force such as this gets together, we want to make sure that they're really thinking about our community and what best fits our community. So already they have added in, including rehabilitation or replacement plans, but I want to make sure that they're not tied to a singular type of facility when other models might be best serving us. In some of the planning conferences that I've gone to, I've heard architects and planners talk about the importance of changing our direction, shifting the way that we think about community development. And instead of potentially building one facility for different types of needs, they were recommending that we have more of a village model or a spread out model in our community. And so I don't know that that is the direction for us to go in, but I don't want to close the door on that. We all know that if we're coming from Inalahan and we're trying to make our way up to Tumon, or we're coming from another part of the island, it may really be against us, against our addressing our healthcare needs if we're trying to go against traffic for 50 minutes or more. So I just want to make sure that that door is open, that if a different model serves us better.
Senator Marsh Tyson, I'm
go
going to
forward with
apologize for you. I'm going to ask that our colleagues please give respect to the individual speaking. Please, again, I apologize. Sergeant of Arms, can we make sure that that is noted based on the standing rules? Please, Sergeant of Arms. Senator Taitano, again, I apologize. Please go ahead and proceed.
So in light of that...
Point of personal privilege, Madam Speaker. It seems that every time I'm up talking with someone, it's not good.
Senator,
but
you are out of
else
order, Senator Taitagui.
So I think they're being pinpointed for something. So just a point of privilege, personal privilege.
So if I may proceed.
Senator Marsh Taitano,
Yes.
you have the floor. Please proceed.
So this first of three amendments is on line 7, page 5. To amend the bill to read, A, coordinate and oversee any and all efforts by the government of Guam concerning the development of a new public hospital facility or other healthcare facility models, including rehabilitation and/or replacement plans involving the current Guam Memorial Hospital Authority facility.
On that motion, there has been an amendment by Senator Marsh Taitano, the Assistant Majority Leader. Anyone wishing to speak? Senator Perez, I will recognize you at this time.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I greatly appreciate this amendment, and I rise in support of it. I think it's important to think about not just rebuilding our hospital, but also rebuilding our health care and looking at it more comprehensively. And I think that this really expands the task of this what is it called? The task of this task force. So I think this is really critical. It gives a lot more meaning to this task force in looking at our health care and not just looking at rebuilding the hospital. So I rise in support of this.
Thank you. Senator Shelton, Legislative Secretary, I will recognize you on the amendment.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I too rise in support of this amendment and thank the author for including this or other health facility models. As we've been discussing for the last few weeks, the Army Corps of Engineers will be doing an assessment on the Guam Memorial Hospital just next week. And I know we don't want to be bound by just saying we will only coordinate for a new hospital facility because we don't know exactly what this assessment will say. So I think that this gives us the flexibility to address the needs that we will have down the line. So Seduas Masi to the author.
Thank you, Legislative Secretary. On the main amendment by Senator March Taitano, Senator Tello Taitagui, you are recognized.
Thank you, Speaker. I too rise in support of this amendment. It's a great inclusion. We had a discussion about this, that, it's important to realize that, or to state that this is not just about building a new hospital. It's more than that. As I mentioned, about rehabilitation was included in that, in the event that the Army Corps of Engineers comes out and says that it's still strong enough, the foundation is good enough to keep going and just add on. So this broadens it even more, and I appreciate the amendment being made by the good author of this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tadigui. Anyone else on the March Titano amendment? Senator Therese Terlaw, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also rise in support of this amendment. I think this has been contemplated by different task forces or advisory councils over the years, and so I think it's still relevant for them to consider alternate models. It was interesting to me that recently GMH has told us that, well, actually it was last year when they were proposing that modernization plan, when they told us that part of what they wanted to do was bring back SNU to the main hospital, and that when I asked why some of these facilities couldn't actually just be built new right away in a different spot instead of an entire hospital, they have a lot of considerations to incorporate, including CMS, which apparently is it looks like it might be a requirement that which parts of this might have to be together and which ones can be separate if even possible. So I think it's still a relevant consideration, so I support this amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Si Jus Masi, Senator Therese Terlahi. Anyone else on the main amendment? If not, are there any objections? Or Senator Marsh, would you like to close? If there are no, are there any objections to this amendment? Hearing none, no objections, motion carries. Senator Marsh Titano, you still have the floor.
Sainamasi, Madam Speaker. So the next amendment that I have is on line 3, page 6, to amend the bill to read, the task force shall develop, it crosses out a master plan and discusses, inserts in recommendations, summarizing the best path forward in developing a new public hospital facility through a purchase agreement, municipal lease program, public-private partnership, or other financing option determined to be the most beneficial to the taxpayers of Guam. And again, it crosses out master plan recommendations shall include but not be limited to, and then I have crossed out a conceptual drawing and models because it was noted to me by one of the previous speakers that that has been a problem in the past, and has them instead recommend funding sources and maintenance plans. The task force shall provide e-legislatura an oral report on its recommendations. And I think that last element is an important one. We all have an investment in seeing this healthcare facility, whatever type of model it is, go forward, make some real progress, and we have a right to understand the directions it's going in and to hear those recommendations. So this allows the task force to summarize, to make the recommendations, but then also to come here and potentially we would place it in our hearing room so that the public could hear along with all the rest of us and hear what they have been working on over the months from the Army Corps of Engineers and the other work that they're doing, the other sources that they're looking at, and have a clear understanding by hearing it directly from the task force itself.
Thank you. On the Senator Titano amendment, are there anyone wishing to speak? Senator Regine Biscoli, I would recognize you at this time.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to just pose a question to the author of this amendment, if she would yield.
Please go ahead and state the question first.
So I'm reading the additional language at the end of this section to read, the task force shall provide legislatura an oral report on its recommendations. And my question was just about the timing. So when would the task force need to provide an oral report? And would this oral report be recurring? So like maybe every 6 months would they have to report to legislatura on their findings or additional recommendations, especially if questions are asked by our body to the task force, if they could, regroup, meet again, and then come back to us with additional recommendations. I just wanted to kind of get an idea about the timeline.
Si Diyos Masi, Senator Lee. Senator Pt.2, do you wish to yield? Would you like to yield, Senator Pt.2?
Hungan. And send Maasi to the speaker for the question. We're all working here together to make things as clear as possible, and I appreciate the opportunity for providing more clarity. So on page 6, it does mention reporting, and there it mentions quarterly reports, and then in A, and in B, it mentions on line 12 that they shall file a complete and detailed written report. Well, quarterly, it mentions it quarterly again. So then further down, I think we would need to cross out master plan there if somebody hasn't planned it to do that. So my amendment would be that when they're providing their quarterly reports, that they are providing them both in the written format that's already in the bill, but then also to provide them quarterly. So we could amend the amendment to better reflect that so it is clearer for everybody, and I could work on that language if I can have just a brief recess.
A moment's recess. Senator Marsh, do you have the, would you like to continue to yield to her inquiry, Senator Lee's inquiry?
Madam Speaker, what I will do is after conferring with my colleagues, I will have this issue be addressed in another amendment, so I will withdraw my amendment, but I do thank the person who had the point of inquiry for their question, because we always do want to make things as clear as possible. And I do have a final amendment when you're ready to have me proceed for that.
There's a motion to withdraw Senator Titano's amendment. Are there any objections? No objections, hearing none. Motion carries. Senator Titano, I'll still give you the floor.
Madam Speaker. So for my final amendment here, it did seem that having some expertise from the Department of Land Management, who has a highly technical review board, would be very important to a board like this or a task force like this. And so my amendment is on line 24, page 3, to amend the bill to read, 6, a member of the Department of Land Management's Application Review Committee who shall be appointed by E. Magahagan Guahan and. Again, it's to add some technical, or at least to assure some technical expertise. They understand land use compatibility, and have all sorts of engineering background and access. So I just wanted to make sure that the board would be assured of having some of that technical expertise. Senator Maasi.
Situas Maasi. Senator Titano. Is that an amendment? Anyone wishing to speak on the amendment? Are there any objections? Are there any objections? No objection. Motion carries. Senator Titano, you still have the floor. Senator Titano, Assistant Majority Leader.
Dispensa to Madam Speaker. Notwithstanding any House rules that might apply, if there are any, in speaking further with one of my colleagues, they were rethinking their own amendment, and so I would like to re-offer my amendment on line 3, page 6, to have to amend the bill to read, the task force shall develop recommendations summarizing the best path forward in developing a new public hospital facility through a purchase agreement, municipal lease program, public-private partnership, or other financing option determined to be the most beneficial to the taxpayers of Guam. The recommendations shall include, but not be limited to, recommended funding sources and maintenance plans. And then it does have that addition of the task force shall provide E. Legislatura an oral report on its recommendations. So we would be back to that addition.
Senator, if you can just do a notwithstanding motion on this one, because we already moved to, I didn't hear it.
Okay,
So on the not,
if that's the proper, I had said notwithstanding, but I did not say the full notwithstanding the House rules. I ask for a reconsideration of this amendment that I withdrew earlier.
so are you, Senator Marsh Titano, Assistant Majority Leader, are you keeping the same amendment that you withdrew just a while ago? You're going to
Yes.
keep the same amendment?
Hungin.
And you're asking for the
reconsideration.
on the reconsideration, are there any objections? There's an objection. Yes, so what happened, Senator, to my colleagues, just to get clarification, the motion was withdrawn, the amendment was withdrawn. Senator Taitsino still had the floor, and she asked, notwithstanding provision, to reconsider this. So this is a reconsideration right now. So I'm going to ask again, the exact same amendment that was withdrawn with no objection, she's asking for the reconsideration, notwithstanding, to come back to the floor. Are there any objections? There was one cited, no objection. Motion carries. Senator Taitsino, you spoke on this. Did you want to further speak on this amendment?
Hungen, Madam Speaker, I just wanted to clarify because there are mentions of master plans elsewhere, and so this amendment does cross out master plan. So I would like to note and ask legal to make technical corrections throughout the bill to replace master plan throughout with recommendations.
I'm going to
here.
make that first amendment to the amendment to cross out master plan and ask legal, if you can ask legal to make wherever master plan shows up, to delete. Am I right? And put
Right, so
in,
master plan is already in this amendment crossed out, and then I would just ask legal to make the technical corrections
on that motion,
throughout.
are there any objections? No objections. Motion carries. Senator Taitsino, still on the same amendment.
Saina Ma'asi, Madam Speaker. And so my answer would still be the same, that the task force would provide an oral report when it provides its recommendations, and then the recommendations are, after legal technical corrections, would be in C. No later than 18 months is when they're going to provide their recommendations. So I hope that answers that previous question and settles in everybody's mind when the oral recommendations would be given.
Thank you, Senator Taitsino. Senator Lee, I'm going to recognize you right now on this amendment.
So just Masi, Madam Speaker, so if I'm understanding this correctly, the task force will provide y legislatura an oral report quarterly. Is that correct?
Yes.
And this report would be reported to the Committee on Health, or?
It would be reported to the legislature in an oral presentation.
Hungen, so would it be an informational hearing that the Committee on Health would have to call? I'm just trying to get an idea for how often we will be involved,
Thank
which
you.
committee, and
Yeah.
again, I'm not opposed to having an oral report in addition to a written report, but I just want to make sure that we're being clear about how often it will be, who will be responsible for organizing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lee. I'm going to take just a moment's recess so I can ask legal. We're in recess. y Mina 35 in the legislature and Guahan is back from recess. Senator March Taitzino, Assistant Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Sana Maasi, Madam Speaker. After conferring with legal and a few more of my colleagues, we came together with language that should address the concerns. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to provide more clarity for everyone. So what I would like to do is withdraw the former amendment.
On that motion to withdraw the present amendment on the floor, hearing no objections, motion carries. Senator Taitzino, do you have another amendment?
Hungin. So it has already been passed around, and this amendment is line 3, page 6, to amend the bill to read, the task force shall develop recommendations summarizing the best path forward in developing a new public hospital facility through a purchase agreement, municipal lease program, public-private partnership, or other financing option determined to be most beneficial to the taxpayers of Guam. The recommendations shall include, but not be limited to, recommended funding sources and maintenance plans. The task force shall provide an oral presentation to Y Legislature en Guahan within the time frame required under Section 77909C. And here I have a note to allow Legislative Council to make technical corrections, including deleting all references to a master plan and substituting master plan with recommendations. This squarely places the singular oral presentation to be within the time frame delineated in Section C at the conclusion of the work of the task force. Saina Maasi, Madam Speaker. Thank you for allowing me to handle this amendment.
On the amendment, anyone wishing to speak? I have Senators San Augustine, then Senator Lee. Oh, just Senator San Augustine, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just have an amendment to her amendment. When it identifies the oral presentation to the legislature, that when it goes to the legislature, it has to, I would highly recommend that we change it, that it goes specifically to the Committee on Health. And let that committee oversight tell us what direction she recommends we should go as a body. Okay, so presentation to the Committee on Health or in the legislature? I mean, well, I'm not too sure what the proper verbiage be, but it's too specifically because the oversight chair on Community Health is the one that's going to take a look at the hospital anyway. And she should be able to tell us, because through all her research, regardless of what the task force present, everything else that comes in will determine the direction we should all concentrate on and move forward on.
So Senator San Augustine, to save a tree right now, after the word oral presentation to a legislature in Guahan through the Oversight Committee on Health?
Yes.
Through the Oversight Committee on Health?
Yes.
On that amendment to the amendment, Senator Taidegui, I will recognize you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I stand in full support of this. The previous speaker made sense. Thank you.
On that amendment, Senator Terlahi, on the San Augustine amendment to the main amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think either way, I think actually this particular provision of the bill speaks about how we're going to finance it. And maybe it's best it goes to the Committee on Appropriations to confirm whether these finances are actually really something concrete or not. But all kidding aside, Madam Speaker, I think it's fine. It's going to go to the legislature. I think one of the things that we're going to have to do here in order to succeed, if we are very sincere about this hospital, is we're going to have to overcome politics. We're going to have to overcome whatever politics we have in here, whatever politics we have between us and the governor's office, the executive branch, all of that. We're going to have to overcome it. This administration is going to have to overcome politics from past administrations, and we're going to have to get the plans that have already been done, all the studies that have been done, and move forward with those. Not go backwards, not continue to debate whether we have the political will to make this actually happen or not. I think those times are way behind us, Madam Speaker, and so I think it's irrelevant, the amendment to the amendment, because obviously I can't serve on the task force, so I can't control this body, and I've never thought I could. So I'm just saying, excuse me.
Please proceed, Senator
Thank
Chalahi.
you, Madam Speaker. The reason we try to prohibit interruptions is because we lose our
Yeah,
train of
Senator,
thought.
Senator Chalahi, so are you objecting to the Committee on Health?
Yeah, I'm objecting to that.
You're
Madam Speaker. I
objecting.
think it's appropriate that it goes to the legislature because this falls on all of us. And there's no one here that can overrule a task force after they've completed recommendations. It's going to take all of us, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Chalahi. So there is an objection.
Point of information, Madam Speaker. I just want to make it noted that there was an interruption behind me, so I just
Senator
want you to
Chalahi.
note that for the record. Note it for the
Senator
record.
Chalahi,
Thank
you are out of order. One moment, please. There has been an objection to the San Augustine amendment to the main motion. Senator Bisco Lee on the Joe San Augustine amendment.
So just Masi, Madam Speaker, I think if I'm understanding this right, I think what the mover, the proffer of this amendment to the amendment is attempting to do is just clarify that the oral presentation, where it goes. So is it given to the speaker and then the speaker schedules the oral presentation within the time frame? I mean,
Or
we just want to
reverse.
make sure that it gets done and that we're able to accomplish this goal, and that whatever the recommendations are for the task force, we're all able to have it move forward. So I think the proffer of the amendment to the amendment is just trying to get a little bit more clarity. So if the oral presentation would be given to Legislature in Guahan, who would be responsible for calling us together in order to have an oral presentation? So would it be an informational hearing, and which committee would take that on? I mean, if it went to the speaker, then we have other processes in place for these things to happen, Madam Speaker, and so that's just why I don't necessarily rise in opposition to this. I think the attempt is to further clarify who the onus would be on a certain member of the legislature to call a informational briefing.
Or the
In my
committee.
mind, that's what I'm envisioning would happen here. So we just want to make sure that if it's the speaker or even the chair of the Committee on Rules would need to determine who would call this informational hearing. It's not that big of a deal. I just want to make sure that the information is shared with all of the members of the legislature.
Si Diyos Masi. So there's been an objection, unless there's a withdrawal. There's been an objection to the amendment. Would anybody like to speak on the Senator San Augustine amendment, which after Legislature in Guahan through the Committee on Health, there's been an objection. All those in favor of the San Augustine amendment signify by raising your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Motion carries. On the Senator Kelly Marsh Teichno amendment as amended, anyone else wishing to speak on the main amendment? If not, are there any objections? Senator Chalahi, would you like to speak on that amendment as amended? Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of the amendment. At the last time we were here in session considering this bill, I had passed out an amendment that was going to actually delete the entire section regarding a master plan, because I thought it was too much of a final product that for us to accomplish in the time that we are looking at, or in any kind of reasonable time. As we all know, our terms here end in 1 year. And so I think to come up with a true master plan might take a little longer than that. We've heard from GITA in their testimony on the bill, excuse me, that they are planning to apply for grants pursuant to the SEEDS economic strategy that they did, that they're going to try to apply for grants to fund a consultant that will work with the administration and the legislature to identify the means necessary for the renovation or the acquisition. So the financial planning part, that's their role, and that's at least part of the plan that they've shared with us. And I know from reading the other task forces that they all underestimated the time that it was going to take them to complete their plans. And I think actually we have some plans already. So, but I do, that's why I support this amendment to change it from a master plan to recommendations. And I'm hoping that if they do this timely, it will give us at least some square footing to proceed on. And I think what we really want is, I think, to do just a little bit differently than what has been done in the past. Excuse me, Matt. It's just to get, to make sure before we get all the way down to a master plan or a modernization plan or an expansion plan, as we have seen in the past, that we get buy-in. I think that's the most critical part, is that they haven't got the buy-in from the legislature in the past. And so these have always failed. They've failed. No matter the time, the volunteer time put in by very, very credible people in our community, I would say, much more expert than I am, but they've put in their best. And so we've come up with some plans, but the problem I have seen is that the legislature has not bought in to any of them all the way. So I think the way it will bring back recommendations as opposed to a final plan is a good way to proceed, and that we're really going to have to pretty much make that decision early on, whether we're proceeding with a general concept of rebuilding or fixing, right? Or both, and we get the buy-in on that, and I hope that will help us to be successful, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Terlahi. Anyone else on the main amendment as amended? If not, are there any objections? Or Senator Tatano, would you like to close? Are there any objections? Hearing no objections, motion carries. Senator Tatano, do you have any more amendments? If not, anyone else on the main motion? Anyone else on the main motion? Senator Terlahi, you're recognized on the main motion. Do you have an amendment?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do have, I would like to speak on the bill, and I rise in support of the bill, and despite the debate as to who's going to be on the committee and who's not, or the task force, and I would note that this task force is actually very limited compared to past task forces. Past task forces have been much larger and included many, many more people. And but I thought that this type of a task force was going to be good because, as I said earlier, it's buy-in from the legislature and the executive branch both together at the same time that's really, really needed. It's that political will. I mean, we're going to have to demonstrate that in order to bring the people of Guam along with us, because it's going to have to, we're going to have to sacrifice to do that. We're going to have to come up with some financing plan, and we're going to need their help and their buy-in. And so I think the first step of all of that is going to have to be to get our buy-in. And I don't think that we've actually failed because of a lack of planning or a lack of ideas. In fact, I think there have been some very impressive ideas, and I think we've gone all over the gamut. I've seen this in some of the task force reports and the discussions on the modernization plan. And it's very interesting how some, for example, the modernization plan that was put before us under immense pressure in the last term, they were trying to get our legislative buy-in into this modernization, to tear down the Z wing and rebuild a new wing, and they had a whole plan lined up. It would be revenue producing, and we would be able to fix up the rest of the hospital, reconsolidate, all kinds of things. But now we are, in less than 2 years, considering whether the structure is even capable of continuing to house our hospital. And so it is just really very hard, I think, to get buy-in when we're going all over the place back and forth like that. And I know that there's a lot of factors, involved to get that buy-in that we're talking about. To get that consensus is really what we need. But I do believe that politics is going to fail us. We're going to have to get rid of that. None of us, if we've got 1 year left in our terms, none of us will be here purportedly for any accumulation of whatever decision that we make on this hospital. We might all be out. It will be our children that are going to live. We're going to watch them suffer, or they're going to watch us suffer. And if we fail to act today. So I think one of the things I would like to proffer, Madam Speaker, is this amendment is to add on page 5, line 18, a new F. There was previously struck out the old F, so I'm going to add a new F in its place. And this new F will say, this is one of the duties of the task force, would be to review previous Guam Memorial Hospital task force reports, advisory council reports, expansion or modernization plans, and the GMH facilities master plans, and report to the legislature all areas or recommendations still feasible, those requiring additional information, and those that are ruled out at this point. I think that would help us a lot, because there aren't any bad ideas in any of those plans, but there are some that are just, we can tell already, that are not feasible. And I would like to consolidate all the ones that are still good, get rid of all the ones that are not feasible anymore, and we know that already, and move forward with all the ideas possible, because we have to be a little flexible going forward without knowing our funding source yet. And I would just like to use as an example the task force report that was done in the 33rd Guam Legislature. So I told you in the last session who comprised this task force, but what they did was they studied, they considered a new state-of-the-art hospital, building a new. They considered the capital outlay plan and that was needed for the current building. They considered a 2012 GMHA feasibility expansion plan that actually did not have a funding proposal in it, it looks like. They considered business models or other options, such as my colleague had proffered earlier, that other options, and they actually put out by law an RFI, request for information, through GITA to go further into this pursuit to determine whether there were any companies interested in such a business model, such as a public-private partnership. They considered the possible lease of GMH and lease the entire operations of the hospital to a management firm. We've heard some of this in the media recently. They considered this they discussed it with one potential vendor. So they continued to keep that as an option. They considered the sale, an outright sale of the hospital, take the proceeds and use that to, take care of the health care part, to pay for health care. They considered status quo, but it says they quickly dismissed those options. They considered establishing other things to facilitate the hospital, such as a medical school, and they outlined the history of the Guam Memorial Hospital. So I feel like if all of these existing, this is just one example of them, but if these are all looked at as quickly as possible, and if they put politics aside and can decide that these are good ideas that came out of the last administration, good ideas that came out of 2 administrations ago, whatever, that we can compile those together and act on all of them. It's very interesting to me, this kind of back and forth on whether the hospital facility can be repaired, especially when we've seen with our own eyes when they repaired the emergency room and the ICU. And so I would hope that at the time that was done, of course there had to have been feasibility studies. And I know that they were trying to show us at the time that the opening an urgent care was also going to be feasible and to help the hospital to obtain revenue.
Senator?
So that would be my recommendation, is to add this to one of the tasks of the hospital, Madam Speaker, is this amendment that's been put before you. Thank you.
On page 3, line 18. Thank you, Senator Therese Chalayi. On the Senator Therese Chalayi amendment, are there anyone wishing to speak on it? Senator Tello-Tadekwi, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I stand in full support. I have here a binder. In fact, one of my colleagues looked at my binder that says Bill 5. Well, it's thick because of the reports of the previous task force that have been in play with the Guam Memorial Task Force group, of course, the task force that was created by Senator Dennis Rodriguez with 202 pages. So it's a lot to intake, but it's important that this task force come up to speed of what was previously done, so they don't reinvent the wheel. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Anyone else on the amendment? If not, are there any objections? No objections. Motion carries. On the main motion, anyone else on the main motion? Senator Jim Moylan, you are recognized on Bill number 5.
Thank you, Speaker. I appreciate the author of this bill and bringing it forward to our body. And I know this was an urgent matter for the authors, introducing this bill back in January to address the urgent need of our hospital's condition. Our 40-year-old hospital, poorly maintained hospital. And now I'm glad we're here 10 months later after the introduction of this bill to discuss putting together this important planning task force. And I think it's an urgent matter, Speaker, and we should take it and move forward with it as soon as possible. But as I read through these committee reports that were provided, somehow I don't see the urgency from different reports that I read. One example is let's wait and see what the Army Corps of Engineers has. And I'm glad the Army Corps of Engineers is addressing this, but why do we have to wait? I don't even know how long it's going to take for the Army Corps of Engineers to provide their report. I'm sure it's going to be thorough, and I'm sure it's something we must have. But in the meantime, this task force can do a lot of good work with all these other studies that we've done. I see another report here, and the Senator from Jonia was talking about Back in April of 2012, there was a feasibility study done, and back in 2015, Gita was talking about a physical and financial sustainability report as well, but that never got anywhere. And in 2016, there was an RFI to see if there's interest to take over the management and operations of Guam Memorial Hospital. But that got nowhere either, and three firms were interested to do this. And then the latest one in 2017, which Senator from Jonia was talking about, is the sustainability study. And it even was supporting legislation up to $125 million to upgrade Guam Memorial Hospital. So which didn't pass the legislation. So we have all these studies, which the author of the bill has copies of with this thick binder. So this task force, whatever the Army Corps of Engineers comes back with, well, we need to be ready for it. And this task force is important. They can start their work right away with all these different studies that we paid money for. And then when the Army Corps of Engineers, whenever they give the report, we can take off running with it. We've waited so long, and since the introduction of this bill, the conditions of the hospital it's falling apart. I never had an elevator leaking water inside of the building. It's terrible. I realize all the amendments were made. I'm sure it would strengthen the bill, and I hope so that it does. And I just hope that the establishment of the task force is just not one-sided, but we really get a good view from the people that are going to be part of this. So I thank the author of the bill, and I thank the amendments made, and I'm in full support of Bill 5. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Moreland. Anyone else wishing to speak on the main motion? If not, Senator Telo-Tadegui, can you close?
Actually, Madam Speaker, if I could just have 1 minute, legal is doing something right now.
Moments recess. You mean 35 na legislature in Guahan is back from recess. I'm going to recognize Senator Tidegui. I understand you have your two amendments.
Yes,
I know
Madam
they're making
Speaker.
copies, so we'll go ahead and just start with your first amendment, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And before my closing, I just have two other amendments that I'd like to proffer. And the first amendment is on page 4, line 1. And it's to add to the bill to read 8. It's to add an 8. And it's a member of the Legislative Committee chairperson with a jurisdiction on health matters or his or her designee. So we're incorporating.
allow
Yeah.
Senator-
And the second amendment too also adds it, making this a task force of 9 instead of 7. And Madam Speaker, if you looked at the other task forces that were put together, you're looking at, as a previous speaker mentioned, there was like 14 in one, there was 12 at the governor's office. So this just increases the task force to add more people that I feel should have a big stake and definitely a wealth of knowledge to be incorporated into this. So that's my first amendment.
Thank you, Senator, but also note that you're going to allow Legislative Council to make technical corrections.
Yes,
It's on-
ma'am.
On the amendment.
Yes,
On
and
the-
to allow,
on-
yeah.
Yes, thank you. On that amendment, are there any objections? Senator, this is for page 4, line 1, to add the bill to read 8, a member of the Legislative Committee chairperson with jurisdiction on health matters or his/her designee, and to allow Legislative Council to make technical corrections. On that amendment, I had Senator Therese and then Senator Lee. Senator Therese, on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I don't object to this amendment. I just wanted to point out for the public, the members of this task force, that there are 2 cabinet members that will be on the task force, GIDA and GMH. There will be 1 member from the Agency Review Committee at the regulatory agencies from the executive branch. So that's 3 from the executive branch. There will be 1 appointee by the governor from the general public with a background in business or finance. And there will be 3 appointees by the Speaker of the Legislature, 1 to be herself, and 1 from the Legislature, and 1 from the general public. I just wanted to point that out. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Chalai. Senator Lee, you recognize.
Seduce Masi, Madam Speaker, I don't rise in objection to this amendment, but just to the language and the way it's written, it reads, a member of the Legislative Committee chairperson with jurisdiction on health matters or his or her designee. So I would just maybe make a recommendation to strike the first 3 words. So a member of, strike those words and just have it read, the Legislative Committee chairperson with jurisdiction on health matters or his or her designee. And I believe that's what the proffer of this amendment is attempting to do. And so I think it just is less confusing that way. Thank
I'll
you.
go ahead and entertain that amendment. On that motion, is there any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. And then on the amendment as amended by Senator Lee, anyone wishing to speak? Are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Senator Tello, you still have the floor on the second amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So have we passed that amendment?
Yes,
All right,
yes.
okay. So the second amendment, Madam Speaker, is on page 4, line 1, and this is adding a number 9, and it's a member of the minority leader of Legislature in Guahan or his or her designee.
And allow,
Madam Speaker, you know, as the previous speaker mentioned, and I think it's grammatically better to cross out, I'd like to make an amendment to this to cross out a member of and just put the minority leader of Legislature in Guahan or his or her designee.
whatever you read on the record, we will accept. So,
Okay.
So go ahead.
So basically, it's to scratch out a member of the same kind of amendment that was done on the prior
So
one.
9 is the minority leader of Legislature in Guam
Yes.
or his or her designee.
Yes.
On that motion, on that amendment, on the striking out of a member of, no objection, motion carries. And on the amended, on the motion as amended, are there any objections? Are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Senator Titlegy, you still have the floor for closing.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And this is just a technicality that, as it mentions on those amendments, it said to allow legislative counsel to make technical corrections. And I hope that the technical corrections would also include that it goes from 4 to 5 to make quorum.
Say that again, Senator Titlegy.
Okay, so in the legislation, in the bill, it says on page, let me get to that, please, sorry, give me one. On page 4, on the top where it says 4 members of the task shall constitute a quorum for the exercise of the authority conferred upon the task force, and a concurrence of at least 4 members is necessary to render a choice or a decision by the task force. We need to have that changed to 5, Madam
Yes.
Speaker.
So on that motion to change 4 to 5, without any objections, motion carries. And I understand, Madam Senator, you may need to change the following 7 individuals to 9. On
Yes.
page 3, item B.
Yes, Madam Speaker.
Can you make that motion, please,
So,
Senator?
Madam Speaker, on page 3, line 8, line 8, instead of 7, it will incorporate 9.
And then,
And then on line 11, the following, it will take away 7, scratch out 7, and incorporate 9.
on that motion, without any objection, motion carries. On the closing, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I really appreciate all the work that we've done today. I'm pretty sure if we had more time, we'd probably put other things in here, you know, but what is in here right now, I feel comfortable with, very comfortable with, and I'm excited about this task force. I think the people of Guam are excited as well, knowing that we are finally going to put both the administration and the executive branch, the administration and the of the executive branch and the legislature together to work together on something this important, the only public hospital that we have on Guam. Again, I thank my colleagues for all their input on this, and I'd like to move to place Bill 5-35 LS to the third reading file.
Third reading voting file.
Yes, please.
On that motion, hearing no objections, motion carries. Senator Regine Bisco-Lee, I'm going to recognize you at this time.
Sujus Masi, Madam Chair, I move that we go back to motions.
Notwithstanding,
I apologize, Madam Speaker. Notwithstanding the House rules, I move that we go back to motions.
notwithstanding the House rules that we move back to motions, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Senator Lee, I'm going to recognize you at this time.
Sujus Masi, Madam Speaker, at this time I'd like to make a motion to place resolution number 249-35 LS, authored by Vice Speaker Talina Cruz Nelson, Senator Amanda Shelton, and colleagues, relative to supporting the Guam Department of Education with its efforts to address high-risk designation and specific conditions and returning financial management and control over federal funds. On to the agenda.
On that motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Senator Sabina Perez, I will recognize you.
Sujus Masi, Madam Speaker. Notwithstanding House rules, I move to place on the session agenda from the Committee on Environment, Revenue, and Taxation and Procurement the nomination of Doris Flores Brooks to serve as a member, the CPA representative on the Public Utilities Commission.
On that motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Senator Perez, you're still recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Notwithstanding House rules, I move to place on the session agenda from the Committee on Environment, Revenue, Taxation, and Procurement the nomination of Elizabeth T. Fisher to serve as a member on the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board.
On that motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Senator Perez, you're still recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Notwithstanding House rules, I move to place on the session agenda from the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation and Procurement the nomination of Earl J. Garrido to serve as a member of the Guam Board of Equalization.
The Board of Equalization. On that motion, are there any objection? No objection. Motion carries. Senator Legislative Secretary Amanda Shelton, you are recognized.
Sedulous Masi, Madam Speaker, I move to place on the session agenda from the Committee on Education, Air Transportation, and Statistics, Research, and Planning the appointment of Nolan G.T. Flores to serve as a member of the Guam Public Library System Board of Directors.
On that motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Legislative Secretary, you're still recognized.
Sedulous Masi, Madam Speaker, again from the Committee on Education, Air Transportation, and Statistics, Research, and Planning, I move to place the appointment of Nicole Nelson as a member of the Guam Public Library System Board of Directors on the session agenda.
On that motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Legislative Secretary, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Now, are there any other motions? Senator Taitano and then, no, Senator Terlahi, then Senator Taitano. Senator Terlahi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place on the agenda Bill number 172-35 COR as amended by the Committee on Health, Tourism, Historic Preservation, Land and Justice. This is an act to amend 80.14 of Article 1 and 80.76 and 80.78 of Article 5, all of Chapter 80, Title 9, Guam Code annotated, relative to ensuring pre-sentence reports and assessments are utilized by the Guam Parole Board prior to the release of any offender on parole.
On that motion, are there any objections? No objections, motion carries. Senator March Taitano, Assistant Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Senator Maasi, Madam Speaker, notwithstanding the House rules, I would like to, I received this letter of support from the Lieutenant Governor regarding his support of the bill augmenting the scope of the Island Beautification Task Force, and I ask that it be appended to the committee report and the journal.
We'll take it on that motion. On that motion, are there any objections? No objections, motion carries. Yes. So I'm going to go ahead and move all the appointments to legislative concurrence first before I accept the motions on third reading. Senator Sabina Perez, I will recognize you first for your nominees.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place on the voting file from the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation and Procurement the nomination of Doris Flores Brooks to serve as a member of the CPA representative on the Public Utilities Commission with a recommendation to do confirm.
On that motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Senator Perez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place on the voting file from the Committee on Environment, Revenue, Taxation, and Procurement the nomination of Elizabeth T. Fisher to serve as a member on the Alcoholic Beverage and Control Board with a recommendation to do confirm.
On that motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Senator Perez, I'll still recognize you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place on the voting file from the Committee on Environment, Revenue, Taxation, and Procurement the nomination of Earl J. Garrido to serve as a member of the Guam Board of Equalization.
On that motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Legislative Secretary, you are recognized.
Sedulous Masi, Madam Speaker, I move from the Committee on Education, Air Transportation, Statistics, Research, and Planning the nomination of Nolan Flores to serve on the Guam Public Library Board to the voting file with the recommendation to do confirm.
On that motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Legislative Secretary, you are recognized.
Again, from the Committee on Education, Air Transportation, Statistics, Research, and Planning, the nomination of Nicole Nelson to serve as a member of the Guam Public Library Board to the voting file with the recommendation to confirm.
On that motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. We are going to take just a moment's recess so that we can pull the two bills, the resolution and the bill, out, and we'll be in recess just for a moment to make sure that our colleagues have copies of those two items on the agenda. We are in recess. Emina 35 na legislature in Guahan is back from recess. For formality's sake, before I start on the resolution, Assistant Majority Leader, Assistant Majority Leader, can you please just take us, notwithstanding the House rules, take us back to second reading for discussion?
Hungin. Notwithstanding the House rules, I motion that we go back to the second reading for discussion.
On that motion, without any objection, motion carries. Legislative Secretary, Senator Shelton, I will recognize you at this time for resolution number 249, and if you can read the title.
Sedulous Masi, Madam Speaker, this is resolution number 249-35 LS, introduced by Vice Speaker Chelina Cruz Nelson and myself, relative to supporting the Guam Department of Education with its effort to address its high-risk designation and specific conditions, and returning financial management and control over federal funds.
On that, you're moving it to the third reading for discussion.
I'd like to move it to the third reading file for discussion.
Please proceed, Legislative Secretary.
Sedulous Masi, Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank the committee for their expeditious work, and also the Department of Education and the Vice Speaker. Of course, we all know the Vice Speaker is currently in Washington, D.C. with the Superintendent of Education as well as board members to meet with officials at the U.S. Department of Education to help us to move off of this high-risk designation. The Guam Department of Education has been designated a high-risk grantee since 2003 with specific conditions, and these conditions were imposed by the U.S. Department of Education. GDOE was required to contract a third-party fiduciary, known as the TPFA, to oversee the financial management of federal grants. And annually, this third-party fiduciary agent costs the Department of Education between $2.5 to $3 million. During federal fiscal year 2007, the U.S. Department of Education required GDOE to develop a comprehensive corrective action plan to address specific issues associated with GDOE's high-risk designation. In 2010, GDOE contracted Alvarez and Marsala LLC as a requirement by the federal fiscal year 2009 amended special conditions. GDOE maintained this contract for 7 years and is currently in negotiations for a new third-party fiduciary agent contract. Total payments to the TPFA have amounted to $20.2 million, of which $7.8 million was paid with federal funds, and the remaining $12.4 million has been paid with local funds. In 2014, GDOE reinstituted its internal audit office, strengthened its fixed assets and procurement divisions, and implemented its MIC program, resulting in the best audit performance experience by GDOE. In federal fiscal year 2015, the U.S. Department of Education acknowledged GDOE's transition plan for a gradual transition that will result in the removal of the TPFA requirement. GDOE has fulfilled its commitment to secure the necessary human resources needed to meet objectives and milestones indicated in the transition plan. Currently, GDOE manages the inventory of its fixed assets and procurement of federally funded goods and services. In 2016, as required by the FFY 2015 Special Conditions Letter, the Internal Audit Office began testing the standard operating procedures deemed critical in addressing GDOE's high-risk designation. Since FY 2002, GDOE has reduced its number of findings from 28 to 2 and question costs from $894,428 to $0 in FY 2016. As a result of the improved audit performance, GDOE qualifies for its designation as a low-risk auditee. But because of the continued U.S. Department of Education high-risk designation, the Guam Department of Education remains at status quo. GDOE's standard operating procedures have been updated, allowing for efficient, effective, and proper administration of the grant. Through comprehensive planning, GDOE implemented sound management principles, including regular communication between the appropriate program and fiscal personnel, to ensure grant activities are carried out as described in approved grant applications. Over the past 6 years, GDOE has taken major steps forward to address its staffing and management needs relative to improving financial management of federal funds. That includes hiring staff in critical positions, bringing strong leadership in and focus to the procurement, fixed assets, and internal audit offices, completion of standard operating procedures, extensive training for employees, and development and testing of internal controls. On May 29, 2018, Superintendent John Fernandez, in a letter to USDOE, requested reconsideration of the special conditions that have been imposed on GDOE. And on October 4th, 2018, Director of Risk Management Service at the United States Department of Education developed a reconsideration evaluation plan, which includes critical actions, milestones, and timelines to guide GDOE in addressing any remaining deficiencies identified by the department in need of completion. Because GDOE demonstrated successful completion of tasks included in the REP, U.S. Department of Education prepared to modify or remove the special conditions, including the removal of the third-party fiduciary agent oversight when appropriate. And Madam Speaker, just the other day we held the public hearing here at the legislature, and we had a representative from the Guam Department of Education join us, and she shared with us the progress of DOE to meet all of these points of the reconsideration evaluation plan. Of the 7 that have been listed for GDOE to meet, GDOE has successfully met 4 of those 7 and is on track to complete the rest by the end of this year. And so the superintendent is requesting from USDOE a re-evaluation in the first 3 months of 2020. So it is imperative that as the Guam Legislature, we address this resolution today to show our support for bringing GDOE off the high-risk status so that we can become a low-risk auditee and save the Department of Education this $2.5 to $3 million every year that we spend on this third-party fiduciary, and use these monies for direct student instruction and hopefully maintenance of all of our public schools that we know are in dire need. And so I am open to the input of all of our colleagues tonight to strengthen this resolution and to help us show our support for the Department of Education and all of our students and young people throughout the island so that we can ensure that we provide them with the best possible education that we can. Sidious Masi, Madam Speaker.
Sidious Masi, Legislative Secretary Shelton. On the main motion, I had Minority Leader Will Castro raise his hand, and then also Senator Regine Bisco-Lee. Senator Will Castro, I recognize you now.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Initially, I didn't prepare remarks, but I felt compelled. First, I want to thank my colleagues for having taken the time and the initiative to build into this resolution all the particulars that will serve as a great record for the people of Guam. Second, because I think this is an important step forward. This is a tool. Ma'am, this is a tool because it carries the full weight of an entire people, this jurisdiction. This is the communication from the people of Guam to, in this case, the United States Secretary of Education. But that's just the first step. Hopefully, this tool can be also transmitted to the White House, and if it further requires, also to the United States Congress, to the respective committee with oversight. Madam Speaker, this resolution, and I hope the final redress of the high-risk status, it's achieved in the spring of 2020 as they're requiring, as they're respectfully requesting. But it's a long time coming, Madam Speaker. I was at the ground level with one of my colleagues here who served as a former chairman when the high-risk designee status was conferred upon the Department of Education. And I got to tell you, there have been a lot of men and women who contributed to the Comprehensive Corrective Action Plan when it was first drafted. Special thanks goes out to Lester Kuykendall, Al Urquiza, the late Louis Regis, Ike Santos then and Ike Santos now as part of the Federal Programs Division. And it just incenses me, Madam Speaker, that a mid-level organization would continue, would sustain these sanctions upon the people of Guam at great expense, in the millions. And again, I commend the leadership, the foresight, and the wherewithal of the Department of Education and everybody who's helped push them forward. Because this record that will be transmitted to the United States Secretary of Education is testament that we've established, that we've had the capacity, we've had the commitment and the resources to demonstrate, Madam Speaker, what this tells the people who have oversight through this third-party fiduciary is that we're very capable right here on Guam to conduct programmatic and fiscal review. You see, high-risk status at the time is basically a warning shot across the bow that if we couldn't account programmatically, meaning whatever the programs are that are being funded, at that time it was through the Consolidated Grant Title 5A, and if we couldn't account for the monies as we used them, or said we would use them, or if we couldn't account for the fixed assets, which are things like tables and computers and other types of assets that you would procure, that there would be sanctions, and sanctions did come. But we've come a very, very long way, thanks to the hardworking men and women of the Department of Education. So I just want to close out by thanking the Central Support Staff, in addition to the Federal Programs Division. And let us not forget that if it wasn't for the schools, the teachers and the program coordinators, the clerical and the professional staff who've been a big part of the compliance, the programmatic and fiscal component of the high-risk status, that we wouldn't be where we're at. So my hat is off to the chairman, to the superintendent, and to our colleague, respective committee chair on education, for representing our people, and for, I hope, and I plead that my colleagues vote unanimously in support of this resolution, that they may have in their hands the voice and the full weight of this jurisdiction and the people of Guam. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Minority Leader Castro. Senator Regine Bisco-Lee on the main motion.
Sudos Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this resolution, and I thank the author and all the co-sponsors of this measure for putting pen to paper to get help, to get millions of dollars each year back into our public schools. And I feel very fortunate and very privileged today, because this new item on our agenda comes at a time when I was able to meet with students from Southern High School who spent most of yesterday shadowing my staff and I and learning more about our local government. The possible inclusion of Resolution 249 on our agenda gave me that opportunity to speak with Valerie, Jaden, Isaiah, and Jordan about this very issue. We asked them a very simple but important question. How would Southern High be helped if it had access to just some of the $2.5 million a year that GDOE currently spends on its third-party fiduciary agent? And Madam Speaker, their answers really won't surprise their fellow students, their teachers, or I'm sure many other stakeholders at the Guam Department of Education. But for the benefit of those who may not have a child in public school currently, here is what some of what they say could be helpful if this federal mandate is lifted. A $2.5 million a year is freed up. improving, repairing, and maintaining facilities. Southern High has been hampered over the years with crumbling infrastructure and consistently broken air conditioning units. The lack of air conditioning in their gym also prohibits Southern High from hosting home games. And for the public school graduates that think aircon is just for comfort, the Dolphins at my office said broken units result in mold in many of the classrooms, making these kids sick. The restrooms are in constant disrepair and in need of proper maintenance. Sometimes the lack of tools and supplies means instead of fixing what broke, restrooms get locked for days, weeks, or months. There is an Olympic-sized swimming pool that hasn't been used to its full potential, if at all, for decades. Capital investments clearly need to be made not just at Southern High, but at many schools, and if planned right, this money can be used to address many of these brick and mortar issues. Purchasing of new textbooks. The students I hosted are taking Advanced Placement American Government, Madam Speaker. This is a rigorous course that can lead to college credit being earned before even beginning their higher education. But it's really disheartening to hear that even this class isn't immune to textbook shortages. Our Southern High AP government students are using a textbook that is 15 years old. How are we to expect them to do well on a college-level curriculum with completely outdated material? Fully funding grounds work. Whatever budget allotment towards the maintenance of the grounds at Southern are clearly not enough, as the students report that a teacher spends his free time cutting the grass that the department just can't afford to do. And Madam Speaker, also just helping needy students. It's no secret that many of our public school students come from families receiving public assistance. The prevalence of families below federal income thresholds has already resulted in free meals for all public school campuses. That is why it's a challenge for many at Southern High and other campuses to self-fund activities, events, and programs. At Southern, all school activities are paid for with fundraisers and in-kind donations, according to these AP government students. That means that the success of annual events like Gupit Chamorro or even prom are completely dependent on tapping into an already overextended community. Seniors may be forced to take up part-time work in order to pay for their cap and gown and other fees associated with graduating. Even simple things like butcher paper for clubs and projects now need to be bought instead of provided by public schools like they once were. Unfortunately, some things remain constant in our public schools, and one of these is the perennial lack of an adequate amount of teachers and support staff. The AP government students said that a lack of substitute teachers meant that the inadequate amount of school aides are made worse when these employees meant to supervise students within a greater campus are instead stuck in the classroom. One student said he was taught by a substitute teacher for a majority of last school year. Another said that an administrator staffer had been detailed to the classroom and now performs her office duties on top of being a fill-in teacher. While it is a finite number, the $2.5 million spent annually due to conditions mandated by US DOE could be used strategically to address these ever-present shortages. Madam Speaker, supplies for GCC-sponsored programs like ProStart and nursing are old and could use replacing. These are among the highest achieving students who consistently show us that they are the cream of the crop when it comes to their national and sometimes international peers in the same or similar programs. Freeing up money currently used for the third-party fiduciary agent can result in even better results from a clearly talented and motivated group of young Guamanians. Madam Speaker, the list goes on, and these are only the problems of Southern High. What more if we had Islanders and Bulldogs and Geckos and Sharks and Titans to hear from? And those are just our amazing high school students. What more from middle and elementary school students? Like the the angels at LBJ Elementary, all of our kids, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, GDOE has been focusing these funds on babysitters for far too long. And while there was undoubtedly good reasons to require a third-party fiduciary agent a decade ago, with all the improvements our public school system has enacted and sustained, it's time for this money to go back into the classroom, to be directed to raise student achievement, to fulfill the mission of GDOE, to provide support, to promote excellence, and to prepare all of our students for life. Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker, and I plead with the members of this body to please support this resolution. It's important that we show our students that we are behind them, that we support them in all of their efforts and their endeavors, and I ask my colleagues for their support. Sidus Masi.
Hago Mas Ben Pobetsu, Senator and Biscoli. Anyone else? Oh, Senator Joseph Augustine, I will recognize you on the main motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, Madam Speaker and my colleagues, my colleague from Bergata was there with me when I was the chairman of the Board of Education when the high risk was ordered. I'm here at the legislature, standing here to say that DOE, at the time that there was placed, the biggest message was, let's get to work. And for the many years, that's all they've been doing, is working as a team. They've accomplished, they've climbed the hills. They've done everything they could. Now they're at the end of the road. $2.5 million can help a lot of schools. Just changing their high risk can open the doors for them for more federal assistance. I said it back then, let's get to work. I say today, let's pass this and let's get her done. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Sidus Masi, Senator San Augustine. Anyone else on the main motion? If Senator Therese Chalahi, I will recognize you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I too rise in support of this resolution, and I'm very glad that the sponsor will be there in Washington, D.C. to meet with these officials and tell them in person how committed we are to removing the high-risk status and to removing the third-party fiduciary. It is really an incredible story. I remember, I was a practicing lawyer at the time when 16 years ago, when they were put on high risk. It felt like a disaster had happened, and because, of course, this had resulted from our management of federal grants at the time. And so I think it's sobering today to reflect on where we have come over the years and the focus that has had to have been made. And I think if you look at the timeline that's provided in the resolution, it's very clear that in 2003, when they went on the high-risk status, they didn't succeed immediately. It was in 2010 when they had to start paying a third-party fiduciary. They were ordered to hire one. And that's, I think, because we had not shown progress enough at the time. And so 8 years later, after that, we're now, they have been very focused. And I want to thank all the team up at DOE for their work, Guam DOE for their work on this, for their focus, for their keeping their eye on if they can get that money back, what we could do with it in the schools, but really for having to work together with each other. I want to also commend Taling Taitano, who's been the financial officer up there. I think she's left DOE now, but I know that she was there for a significant part of this. And many people have started and been a part of all of it, but I do, it's nothing to be super proud of that we, had to get into this status in the first place. But I do appreciate very much the efforts of our superintendent and all of his team, currently and past teams, in their efforts to get us to where we are today. And I very much hope and wish them success in their reconsideration, and that of course, going forward, that we do what we commit in this resolution, and that is we commit to doing everything that we need to do to make sure that they fulfill their obligations, to meet their requirements, and that we adequately address the conditions that are imposed. We can't lose sight of that, Madam Speaker. We have to stay focused. So, Situs Masi, and thank you again. Congratulations to DOE for the progress so far, and wishing you more progress in the near future. Situs Masi.
Buen provecho, Senator Chalahi. Senator Clint Rigel, on the main motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to rise in support of this resolution. I have two kids that are both public school students. They go to Talafofo Elementary, and I know firsthand the struggles that the public school system faces. As my colleague from Tamuning, who spoke previously, mentioned about textbooks, it's absolutely true. My kids have one textbook from the 1980s and one from 1997. I think that's unacceptable to have textbooks that old in the public school system. And they're not just that old, they look old. And that's why we looked at the date to see how old they were, is when you look at the outside of the textbook and the inside, you can tell it's a very old textbook. So you wonder, how old is this textbook? And when you flip it over and you look, 1987, 1997. That's just one of the issues we have in the public schools. There are plenty of issues in the public schools. My daughter has problems in her classroom. Aircon goes out regularly. And what happens is the teachers themselves have to go and buy fans, bring fans to the classroom just to keep the classrooms cool. Those are the problems we have in the school system that can be aided by this additional $2.5 million a year that we can get if we have this third-party fiduciary agent removed. So that's why I'm in full support of this, and I remember as previous speakers were mentioning how it all happened, how at first we were put on high-risk grantee status, and then eventually, unfortunately, we were forced to hire a third-party fiduciary agent, which is basically a babysitter for our federal finances. So with that, I just wanted to rise in support and say that just imagine how much, if we never were put on this high-risk grantee status and never had to get a third-party fiduciary agent, that's $25 million over the course of the several years, 10 years that we've had this. $25 million that could have been used for textbooks, $25 million that it could have been used for repairs to the schools, repairs to the air conditioning, $25 million that could have been used for simple things like toilet paper that runs out in our schools. So with that, I fully support this resolution, and I absolutely hope that we can get not only the third-party fiduciary agent removed, but also completely remove the high-risk grantee status. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Situs Masi. Senator Clint, on the main motion. Senator Sabina, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also rise in support of this resolution. I was just starting out as a teacher when it was put on a fiduciary status, and being in the front lines, I know what it was like having to purchase my own projectors, my own computers, and just having to fill in the holes that was not for the resources that were not provided to teachers. And during the years, I saw increases in resources that were given to teachers. So nowadays, science and math teachers are now provided those items that I had to purchase myself. And so I think this is a very momentous occasion for Guam Department of Education, and that they've committed themselves to improving their fiscal controls, which is so important and which has so much impact in the classroom. And so I would like to congratulate them on their success, and also support them in their efforts to get off this third-party receivership, fiduciary receivership. So yes, again, I know $2.5 million a year can go a long way, but I also know that there's a lot more that needs to be done as well. Coming from the Department of Education, and I'm here to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Parrish. Anyone else on the main motion? If not, Legislative Secretary Shelton, you can close.
Situs Masi, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank all of our colleagues for rising in support of this resolution and recognizing how important it is that we address this evening. And I'd just like to reiterate that this resolution is really to recognize the efforts that GDOE has made in addressing the high-risk designation. We want to thank all of the administrators, the people behind the scenes at GDOE who have been working very hard to meet all of these points in the corrective action plan. And it's also to state for the record that the Guam Legislature will continue to work and collaborate with GDOE and to support GDOE's efforts to meet all of these requirements to help us get off of this high-risk status, and that we are committed to working with DOE to ensure that all requirements are fully and adequately addressed to meet the federal conditions imposed and to have the cost savings identified from the TPFA redirected to serve Guam public school students. And all of our colleagues here have talked about where we can put this money. Every year we can see millions of dollars in savings. We know that we've addressed the issues that have led to this third-party fiduciary agent and this high-risk status. We've worked very hard to address those issues, and we know that moving forward, all of us, the Team Guam approach, will work to support GDOE to continue that progress and to continue that hard work. With that being said, Madam Speaker, I'd like to add some of our colleagues on as co-sponsors of this resolution. First, Senator Sabina Flores Perez, you, Madam Speaker, Tina Rose Munoz Barnes, Senator Joseph Augustine, Senator Regine Bisco Lee, Senator Teresa M. Terlahi, Senator Kelly Marsh Taitano, Senator Clint Rigel, Senator Jose Pito Terlahi, Senator Will Castro, and Senator Luis Muña, and Senator Jim Moylan.
On that motion, are there any objections? No.
Thank you.
On the motion? On the motion.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I ask that I also be included on that list.
And
And to add Senator Telo Taitagui to the list of co-sponsors.
on that motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Motion to move to the third.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place resolution number 249-35 to the third reading file for voting.
On that motion, without any objection, motion carries. We are just going to take a moment's recess. Mina 35 na legislature in Guahan is back from recess. I'm going to recognize Senator Therese Terlahi on bill number 172-35 COR. Senator Terlahi.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Again, the title is Relative to Ensuring Pre-Sentence Reports and Assessments Are Utilized by the Guam Parole Board Prior to the Release of Any Offender on Parole. Currently, the pre-sentencing investigation reports...
Senator, on the motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion.
And if you can just read the title.
Okay, Madam Speaker, I'll just... I'd like to make a motion to move Bill number 172-35 COR as amended by the Committee on Health, Tourism, Historic Preservation, Land, and Justice to the third reading file. The bill title is An Act to Amend 80.14 of Article 1 and Sections 80.76 and 80.78 of Article 5, all of Chapter 80, Title 9, Guam Code Annotated, relative to ensuring pre-sentence reports and assessments are utilized by the Guam Parole Board prior to the release of any offender on parole.
On the third reading to speak. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So currently, these pre-sentence investigation reports and the recommendations at the time of sentencing have not been made available to the parole board, despite the mandate in statute that the parole board will have access to these. So this bill will mandate that any and all pretrial, pre-sentencing, and incarceration assessment reports be made available to the parole board before they determine if a prisoner's release. It is intended to better ensure safety of the public. That's our goal. It's also an effort to eliminate any barriers to the Guam Parole Board's review of any of these pre-sentence and incarceration reports and assessments. It was drafted based on the feedback from the public, from survivors and victims advocates after several public roundtables and meetings. The Guam Parole Board is in support of this bill, as access to these investigations will help them in assessing the risk on release of a parolee. The DOC, Department of Corrections, social workers are also in support of this bill. It will give them access to information that may be helpful during the person's incarceration and whether they are ready for parole. So the original bill was amended in committee to ensure, upon the advice of Legal Bureau of the Legislature, to ensure that the board's discretion was not limited in any way after their review of these additional records. So I respectfully ask my colleagues to please support the passage of this bill and to help us achieve justice for victims and to prevent further harm in our community by the inappropriate release of prisoners. Sizuos Masi, Madam Speaker.
Sizuos Masi, Senator Therese, on the main motion. If not, Senator Therese, could you put it on the motion to put it on the third reading, please?
Thank you to my colleagues, and yes, I'd like to move that the bill then be put on the third reading for voting.
Yes.
Sizuos
Thank
Masi.
you. On that motion, without any objection, motion carries. I'm going to just take a moment's recess. Emina Trentay-Sinclair Legislature and Guam is back from recess. Assistant Majority Leader, can I have a motion to recess to 3 p.m. on Monday?
Hungin, Madam Speaker. I motion that we recess until 3 p.m. on Monday
For voting.
for voting.
On that motion, without any objection, motion carries. Have a good weekend, colleagues.